Kusi, the last Dreambinder. I'll write it in one immersive part without breaks or headings. And you can use it directly for YouTube narration or a dramatic bedtime story. Let's begin. In the land of Velimir, where dreams and memories braided the air like threads of silver mist, the world no longer dreamed. The soil no longer pulsed with magic. The stars, once radiant and watchful, turned cold and distant. People no longer sang lullabies, because dreams had become a curse and sleep a battlefield. But there was one girl who still remembered the lullabies. Her name was Kusi. She was born in the shadow of silence, in a hidden forest temple beneath weeping oaks. On the night of her birth, the moon refused to rise. The midwives whispered of ill omens and fates too heavy for a child to carry. But her mother, Irina, sang to her anyway. A lullaby forgotten by most, woven from ancient dream magic, where every note called to the spirit of the world. That Kusi's first breath was a whisper across dimensions. By age 5, Kusi could walk into dreams. Not just her own, but those of beasts, birds, rivers, and men. She would place her small hand on the bark of a dying tree, close her eyes, and dream its first memory, a sky so blue it hummed. Elders feared her. Others called her a blessing. But those closest to the royal court knew exactly what she was. A Dreambinder, one of the last, an ancient bloodline cursed with the power to reshape reality through dreams. Once revered, now hunted, because the king of Velimir, Alvar the Hollow-Eyed, had declared all Dreambinders enemies of the throne. Kusi was just 8 when they came for her family. She remembered the smell of ash before she saw the flames. She remembered clutching her brother Elin's hand as they ran barefoot through frostbitten fields, their father's screams echoing behind them. Elin pushed her into the roots of an old tree, whispered, "Stay hidden," and vanished into the smoke. She never saw him again. Years passed. Kusi wandered alone, hiding from soldiers and shadows, burying her power beneath silence. She aged in solitude, but never forgot the feeling of a dream unfurling. How warm it felt to believe the impossible. By 17, she was no longer a girl lost in the world. She was a weapon sharpened by grief, and she wanted justice. Not for vengeance, not for power, but because she had seen the dreams of the king, the fear that rotted him from within. He was afraid. Of her, of what she could awaken. But first, she had to awaken herself. In a forest no map remembered, she returned to the Temple of Whispers, now broken and moss-covered. There, beneath a sky of torn stars, she touched the dream pool, a mirror of ancient waters where truth revealed itself. And in its depths, she saw Elin, a flickering face, eyes wide with peace. A ghost memory. Her hands trembled. "I saw you again," she whispered, voice cracking. "Even in pieces, I remember you." She knew then what she had to do. She had to bind the final dream, the dream of returning. A forbidden magic that could reset the land, heal its wounds, and awaken its soul. But to do so, she needed to travel to the very heart of Velimir, Castle Naraxis. And she couldn't do it alone. She wandered across ruined fields and hollowed-out towns, gathering fragments of resistance. Outcasts, rebels, lost poets who remembered what singing once felt like. And among them was Thane, a former royal guard who had turned on the king after watching his own daughter scream herself to death from dream poisoning. When Thane first saw Kusi, he laughed bitterly. "Another child with anger in her eyes," he said. Kusi didn't speak. She simply stepped forward and placed a dream in his mind, his daughter, alive again. In a world where dreams healed instead of killed, he followed her after that. Without question, together, they found others, broken dream seers, songless bards, warriors who fought without hope. Kusi gave them back their dreams. Not illusions, but truths buried deep beneath sorrow. And when she stood before them, silver ribbon tied to her wrist, her voice steady, she said, "We do not fight for thrones. We fight for lullabies, for starlight, for the right to sleep without screaming." And they followed her into the darkness. Castle Naraxis stood like a jagged tooth in the throat of the world. Its towers clawed at the sky, its gates etched with runes of warding. No one had breached it in over a century, but Kusi didn't plan to breach it with swords. She walked through the front gate alone, as the others circled the perimeter. The guards fell into slumber as she passed, drawn into dreams so deep they forgot they had bodies in the throne room. King Alvar waited. He sat beneath a web of obsidian light, skin pale, eyes sunken. He looked older than stone and more afraid than a boy. So, he rasped, the child returns. Kusi stood still. I am not a child. No, he said. You're her. The last thread. The last lie. I am the last dream, she said. And you will not wake from this one. He laughed, bitter and small. You think you can end a kingdom with hope? I think I can end it with truth, she said. And then, she placed her fingers on the stone floor. She sang out a sound so ancient the stars paused. A note so pure it cracked the air. The walls shook. The towers cried. And the king's dreams, his nightmares, regrets, sins, spilled into the room like shadows made of screams that he fell to his knees. Stop, please. I was trying to protect them. You caged them, she whispered. You burned their sleep. You turned wonder into weapons. I did what I had to. So will I. And she closed her eyes. From her chest, a ribbon of silver light unwound. The Dreambinder's thread, her soul, her power, her life it floated up, swirled, and fell upon the king. Then the castle, then the land, and the world began to weep. Towers melted into forests. Stones hummed with memory. The dead whispered joy. Rivers reversed. Stars blinked alive, and dreams returned. But Kusi, she fell. Her body faded like dew under morning light. Her last breath was not a cry, but a lullaby. Sleep now, little world. You are no longer broken. Remember the girl who dreamed you whole. Years passed, and on clear nights, when the wind is kind and the moon is shy, children wake with laughter in their lungs. They say they dreamed of a girl with silver ribbons who smiled as she turned nightmares into stars. And in the sky, a new constellation burns, shaped like a ribbon, shaped like a name, Kusi. The Fire Beneath the Snow, a fantasy audiobook script, 10,000 words, written in immersive style for narration. No chapters, no brackets, just seamless storytelling. They called it the endless winter, not because time stopped, but because time forgot. It had been snowing in the village of Harith for so long that no one remembered what came before. The stories of green hills and blooming flowers were whispered only to children, and even they stopped believing by the time their cheeks turned pale with frost. Harith was a village wrapped in silence. The kind of silence that pressed on your bones and made you afraid to speak too loudly, as though the air might shatter. The people were known as the cold-bound. They wore heavy cloaks and quiet eyes. They buried warmth with every breath. The mountain that loomed above them, Mount Vaser, was their god and their warden. It stood like a judge watching a prisoner, covered in snow that never melted and winds that screamed like old ghosts. The villagers believed it was cursed, and they were its punishment. No one ever touched the mountain, and no one lit a fire. They said that fire had once angered the mountain, that a child long ago had brought flame to the summit, and the world burned in answer. The curse had come after that, an eternal snowstorm, a hush that never lifted, and a law: never be warm, never light the flame, never love too much. That was the law that raised Leora. She was born during the worst storm in a century, on a night when the wind howled like it had teeth. Her mother died giving birth, and the midwives almost refused to touch her. The child did not cry. She opened her eyes too wide, and her skin was warm, too warm. They named her Leora, which meant light in the old tongue. A cruel name, perhaps, or a hopeful one. Either way, the elders decided she would not be raised like the others. They wrapped her in frost cloth and gave her a stone bed in the northern tower, alone, far from the village heart, where her strange heat couldn't spread. She grew, year by year, behind those walls, that a quiet girl with fire in her blood and questions in her heart. Her caregivers came and went like shadows. They fed her cold broth, never held her long, and flinched if she brushed their sleeves. She learned early not to ask for stories, not to mention the dreams, not to show how the frost melted under her breath. But when she was alone, she would trace flames on the walls with her finger, flames that glowed red for seconds before fading to stone. And every night, she dreamed that in the dreams, she ran barefoot through grass so green it ached. She heard laughter that made her chest hurt. She saw a sun, not the pale, sickly one that sometimes hung in Haritha's sky, but a golden star that kissed her skin. In the center of every dream, a voice would come, soft and steady. Come find me. The fire is not your enemy. At first, she was too young to understand. But the dreams never stopped. If anything, they grew more vivid, more urgent. And when she was old enough to write, she began filling stolen pages with what she saw: drawings of glowing caves, sketches of flame, lines of poetry that made no sense but felt like truth. She kept them hidden beneath the floorboards. She knew what would happen if the elders found them. Fire wasn't just illegal in Harith. It was sacred, dangerous, a sin and a weapon wrapped in one. She was forbidden to even say the word. Still, it pulsed beneath her skin, the T-17. Her hands no longer needed to touch something to warm it. Her body radiated a quiet, constant heat. Her room smelled faintly of scorched stone. She didn't tell anyone. She just waited. For what? She didn't know. But then, on the morning of her 18th year, the bell rang. That it was a sound none of the villagers had heard in their lifetime. A great iron clanging that split the sky and sent birds scattering. People rushed into the square, their faces pale, breath rising in panicked clouds. Leora was on the tower's rooftop, arms tucked into her cloak, when she felt it. The mountain had moved, not visibly, not like an avalanche, but deep beneath her feet, a tremor, a slow, groaning shift, like stone stretching after a long sleep. And in that moment, she felt it again, the voice from her dreams, louder now. The fire is waking. So must you. The villagers cried of omens. They begged the elders to pray. The snow began to fall in strange, rhythmic flurries. The wind pulsed in time with something deeper, and Leora, for the first time, descended the tower steps. She stepped into the square barefoot. The snow melted as she walked. Her breath came in waves of steam. Eyes turned. Mouths opened. No one spoke. She faced Merrick, the village leader. Her uncle, a tall, grim man wrapped in furs. "Let me go to the mountain," she said. The silence cracked. "You'll bring it down on us all," he snapped. "It's already coming," she answered. "Can't you feel it? The fire cursed us, girl. You would wake it again." "No, I would listen to it." "Then you'll die? And take us with you." But they didn't stop her. Maybe it was fear. Or all. Or the way the snow refused to touch her. Whatever it was, the villagers watched in frozen disbelief as Leora turned toward Mount Vaser and began to climb. She didn't bring supplies. The cold didn't bite her. Her path was lit by embers beneath the snow, as though the mountain itself recognized her. As if it had been waiting. For 2 days and nights, she climbed. Blizzards hissed. Wolves howled in distant pines. But nothing stopped her. On the 3rd night, she reached the summit. There, in a ring of bare stone, was a cave. She entered. Inside, it was warmer. The walls glowed faintly red, veins of ancient rock pulsing like slow fire. At the cave's center stood an altar carved from black glass. Floating above it, a flame, not a torch, not a candle, but a shape alive, flickering softly. A flame in the shape of a heart. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was waiting. She stepped closer. The flame stirred, sensing her, and the voice returned, not in her mind, but in the cave itself, echoing like a breath. "You are the one they feared, and the one they need." Leora reached out. Her fingers brushed the flame. The world turned inside out. Heat roared through her body. Not pain, awakening. Visions flooded her. A world before the snow, full of warmth and color and light. The truth of the curse. It wasn't the fire that had punished the people. It was the people who had tried to cage the fire. They had worshipped it, yes, but with fear. They had tried to possess it, bind it in rituals and silence. And when the flame rebelled, when it sought freedom, they buried it. They built myths. They locked it away in the mountain, praying it would never rise again. But now, it had chosen her. Leora opened her eyes. The flame had entered her chest. She glowed from within. Her heartbeat hummed like a drum. Her skin shimmered with light. She stepped outside. The snow hissed and vanished. Clouds tore apart. Sunlight, real sunlight, poured down for the first time in 100 years. And in the valley below, the villagers dropped to their knees. They saw her as fire and girl, as warmth and warning. They feared her. They loved her. They didn't understand her. But they knew one thing. The winter was ending. Leora returned to the square. She knelt and placed her palm on the ground. A flower bloomed. Red, bright, defiant. And the silence that had ruled Harith cracked like ice beneath fire. Leora spoke only one sentence. I am not your curse. I am your spring. And from that moment on, the world remembered how to dream again. The bell that never rang. A cursed seaside town where a tower bell hasn't rung in 300 years, until the day a boy with no voice arrives. They said the bell tower was cursed. That it stood at the edge of the sea, rising crooked and forgotten above the town of Luthen. Covered in ivy and silence, it hadn't rung in 3 centuries. Not once. Not during weddings. Not during deaths. Not even when the sea took the harbor during the Great Flood. The bell just stood there, mute, patient, watching. They said it would never ring again. But what the people feared most wasn't that it had gone silent. It was that one day it might ring again. Because the last time it did, a war began. And so the tower became a boundary, a monument, a threat. No one approached it. No one climbed its worn spiral stairs. Not the children. Not the brave. Not even the mad. Except for the boy who had no name. He came from the no one saw him arrive. One morning, he was just there, sitting on the stone bench beside the tower, dripping wet, wrapped in gray cloth, eyes like storm clouds. He didn't speak. He couldn't. And when the townspeople asked him questions, he just looked at them with a sadness far too old for his face. They let him stay. Not out of kindness, but fear. The priest called him cursed. The mayor called him a burden. But the baker left bread beside the bench every morning, and the widow who lived near the cliffs mended him a coat. He never left the bell tower. He would sit for hours, staring up at it. Sometimes he would place his palm against its stone base and close his eyes, as if listening for something only he could hear. That he didn't beg. He didn't steal. He only watched. And then, on the 7th night, the tide rose higher than it ever had. The waves swallowed boats. The wind howled like grief. And the clouds opened with a rain that felt more like memory than water. At dawn, the town awoke to silence. The storm had stopped. The sea was still. And the bell had rung. Only once. A single, long, mournful note that echoed down the cliffs and through the town like the cry of a forgotten god. People screamed. Some fell to their knees. Some prayed. Some ran. But when they gathered at the tower, the boy was gone. No footprints. No trail. Only the open door at the tower's base. And the faint warmth of his palm still pressed into the stone. No one dared enter. For the next 3 days, the bell rang once at dawn. No more, no less. And each day, something changed. The first day, the dead garden behind the chapel began to bloom. The second day, the fisherman's wife, who had been blind for 20 years, opened her eyes and wept. The third day, a child long thought stillborn cried out in her mother's arms. Some said it was a blessing. Others said it was a warning. On the 4th day, the boy returned. He stood at the top of the bell tower, as if he had always belonged there. His face calm, his eyes glowing faintly with silver light. And in his hands, he held a journal, old, soaked, barely holding together. The widow from the cliffs recognized it had belonged to her son, lost to the sea 30 years before. The boy descended the steps slowly. When he reached the crowd, he held out the journal to her with shaking hands. She took it. She opened the first page. Inside, written in a trembling but unmistakable hand, was a single line. I am sorry I didn't say goodbye. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the book to her chest. Sobbing into the morning, No one stopped the boy as he walked past them. Down the hill, through the streets, No one dared. They followed him in silence as he passed the statue of St. Hellerin, through the marketplace, and down to the shore. He stopped at the edge of the water and turned to face them. He pointed to his throat, then to the sea. Then he placed a hand on his heart. And for the first time, someone understood. He was not cursed, he was chosen. Not by the gods, but by the bell, because the bell did not ring for death. It rang for memory, for the things people refused to grieve, the wars never mourned, the children never buried, the songs never finished, and the bell had waited 300 years for someone who could carry it again. Someone quiet enough to hear the silence inside sorrow. Someone broken enough to echo it. The boy turned back to the sea and walked into the water. He did not drown, that he became light. Silver threads rose from his body like mist, unraveling into the sky. The sea glowed gold, and the bell rang again. This time, no one screamed. They listened, and in the years that followed, Luthen changed, not all at once, but slowly, gently. People began planting gardens, painting their doors, singing old lullabies. The tower became a place of pilgrimage, not of worship, but of remembering. And every year, on the seventh night after the highest tide, the bell rings once a long, soft note, like a whisper, like an apology, like a boy who never needed a name, because he had always been one thing, and one thing only, the echo of all we'd forgotten. The song of the hollow in a forest that once sang with life, where rivers whispered and trees danced in the wind, there now stood only silence. And at the heart of that silence stood a hollow tree, tall, blackened, withered by time, and yet strangely alive. They say the tree had once been a girl. Her name was Alira, a child born of wind and wood, the daughter of a dying song. When she cried, the birds would hush to listen. When she laughed, flowers would bloom. But when the war came, when fire touched the sky and iron broke the soil, Alira was only 12, and the forests were no longer safe. Let me take you back. The last dawn of Alira lived in Everwood, a realm of perpetual dawn, where sunlight never fully faded and dreams took the form of birds. Her father, Soren, was a binder of melodies, the last Lorzinger, whose voice could call rain or calm wolves. Her mother, Uria, had vanished into mist when Alira was born, becoming one with the forest. Everwood had been free until the invaders came. Men from across the Iron Sea, skeptical of magic, wielding fire and tools of extraction, wanted Everwood's heart for power. The war was brief. The forest bled, and Alira, still a girl, was hidden away by Soren inside the hollow tree, a sacred relic older than memory. I will return. Soren had promised he never did. Roots that of our time twisted inside the hollow tree. Alira did not age like mortals. Inside its living wood, she listened. She heard the cries of foxes chased by steel, the groans of earth split by greed, and the final breaths of trees whose names had once been sung. The forest forgot joy. Alira forgot her voice, but the hollow tree remembered. It fed her with dreams, visions, names, and one name rose again and again. The wound maker, the man who had felled Soren, the man who burned the singing trees, the one whose blade sang with death. Alira's heart, once soft, now ached with roots of vengeance. The song that in one morning, if it could be called that, a boy wandered into the dead forest. His name was Kale, an orphan of the Iron clans, seeking wood for coin. But he was not like the others. He carried no blade, only a lute, old and cracked. He strummed once, and the hollow tree stirred. Alira heard it, a chord, familiar and aching. Soren's lullaby, played imperfectly, yet true. She stepped out for the first time in decades. Her skin glowed like bark, her hair long and silvered with sap. Her voice cracked, but it was a voice. Where did you learn that song? She asked. Kale dropped the lute. My mother used to hum it. Said it came from a tree that once wept for the world. Alira wept too. Fire does not they traveled together. Alira, the tree girl, and Kale, the boy with the broken song. She taught him of the forest's names. He taught her how to walk again, how to laugh, how to be something other than bark and sorrow. But the forest was still hunted. The wound maker was now a general, and he feared what lived in the hollow tree. He sent machines of fire, wolves forged of coal and steel, poison mist that turned bark to ash. Alira fought, not with blades, but with memory. She sang. Her voice became a storm. The names of trees rose like thunder. Roots surged from the soil, and the forest awakened. Kale watched as the hollow tree shone with light. But then came the wound maker. The final battle was not loud. It happened under silver rain. The wound maker, old, scarred, his armor rusted with blood, stepped into the clearing with an axe that hummed. Alira, he spat. You are the last of them. She stood tall, her fingers rooted in the soil. I am the first, she whispered. The first to remember. They clashed, not with steel, but with song he tried to silence her with pain. But Kale, bruised and battered, stood between them and played the lullaby again. It fractured the windmaker's blade. It cracked the hollow tree open, and from its heart emerged light. Soren's final melody. 6. The tree that SNS the woundmaker fell, not killed, but unmade. His memories returned, and he wept like a child at the foot of the very tree he tried to destroy. Alira touched his shoulder and turned him into wind. She became the forest. Her body scattered into petals. Her voice became the rustling of leaves, and her memory, the roots beneath every tree. Kale remained. He built a shrine of song where the hollow tree once stood. And travelers who wander near the ruins speak of melodies that come from nowhere. They say the forest sings again. They say her name, Elira. And so the forest, once forgotten, breathes once more. And in every hollow tree, every breeze through the leaves, and every lonely lullaby strummed on cracked strings, lives the song of Elira, the one who remembered, the one who made even silence sing. The Forest of Names, in a forgotten part of the world, where rivers hum ancient songs and trees whisper secrets in the wind, there lies a forest untouched by time, a place not marked on any map, nor spoken of by the common tongue. This is not a tale of heroes or wars, but of memory, identity, and the silent bond between a girl and the forest that remembers everything. Let me take you there now. Breathe deeply. Let the world fall away and drift into the forest of names. The forest that remembers. They said the forest held every name ever spoken. Every child's first breath. Every mother's cry. Every whispered prayer and forgotten vow. The trees remembered. The moss remembered. Even the air seemed to shimmer with memory. Only one person lived within its hush, a girl with silver hair and no name. She had been found at the forest's edge, wrapped in a blanket stitched from night and frost. No one knew where she came from, and the villagers were too afraid to keep her. So they left her there, by the edge of the woods. But the forest did not reject her. It remembered her. The trees bent gently over her, as if to shield her from the wind. The ground softened beneath her tiny body. The wind carried lullabies in a language long lost. And so, she grew, not with people, but with pines and oaks and glowing ferns that only bloomed under moonlight. The girl with no name. She never needed a name in the forest. Birds came to her shoulder without fear. Foxes curled beside her as she slept. Even the old, grumbling bear beneath the northern cliffs allowed her to share his cave when storms howled. The forest spoke to her in feelings, warmth, hunger, joy, sadness. It gave her shelter, berries, and whispers of ancient truths. But the girl was growing older, and questions stirred inside her heart like restless wings. Who was she? Why had no one come looking? And why did the wind sometimes moan with a voice that sounded familiar? The arrival. It was during the frostfall, the time between autumn and winter, when he came. A boy no older than she, with eyes like candlelight and a cloak torn by thorns. He collapsed by the whispering birch, a sacred tree that bloomed with pale white leaves even in snow. The forest would have rejected any other stranger. But this boy, the earth cradled him. The birds watched. The girl, she came. He opened his eyes as she knelt. "You found me," he whispered. Her silver hair glowed beneath the pale moon. She tilted her head. "You're hurt." He nodded. "I ran. From the palace. From my name." She blinked. "You have a name?" He smiled. "Too many." The boy, whose real name he would not share, called himself Ash. He carried stories on his skin, scars shaped like sigils, bruises in royal patterns. He said he was once a prince, but no longer. He had walked for weeks, following dreams of a girl in a forest who remembered everything. "I don't remember," she said. "Not even myself. But the forest remembers for you." They built a quiet friendship. Days passed in the rhythm of snowfalls and sunrise. He helped her collect firewood. She showed him which mushrooms glowed at night. They shared silences that said more than words. And yet, something stirred in the air. The forest, once content, had grown, watchful. The winds began to carry warnings. The names beneath the roots. One evening, beneath the crimson twilight, Ash dared to ask, "Why does no one come here?" She hesitated. Then, she whispered, "Because this forest holds the names of the lost, of those who were erased, He blinked. Erased. People who were taken, forgotten, or silenced. He felt the chills settle into his bones. And you? I think. I was one of them. They stood in silence, the weight of it pressing around them like snowfall. Then Ash said, "Then we'll find your name." "How?" He smiled. "We'll ask the trees." The voice of the forest that night. They ventured deeper than ever before, into the heart of the forest, where the ground shimmered with stardust and the trees no longer spoke with words, but memories. Every tree trunk held faint marks, symbols like claw marks and water ripples. They were names, not letters, not languages, just essence. The girl touched one. A rush of warmth filled her. A memory not her own. A cradle, a lullaby in a soft, humming voice. Then another tree. A cry, a man's shout, a flash of silver flame. Then the third tree. This time, she fell to her knees. She saw herself. A baby handed to masked figures, a kingdom weeping, a woman screaming her name. Kyra. The name rang through her like thunder. Kyra. The girl with silver hair had a name. The Dreambinder Ash helped her up, but his face was pale. "What's wrong?" she asked. He trembled. "I remember now. I remember why I came." The ground shook slightly. A rumble in the earth. He whispered, "You're not just a forgotten girl. You're the last Dreambinder." She frowned. "What's that?" He swallowed. "A Dreambinder can unlock forgotten names, even those buried by magic. You can awaken memories across the world, restore people erased by evil." "And why is that bad?" He looked into her eyes. "Because the king wants the world to forget." The forest burns that night. The forest screamed. Fire rained from the sky. Soldiers in black armor marched between the trees, setting flame to memory itself. The king had found her. Ash grabbed her hand. "We run." But Kyra turned. "No." She walked to the whispering birch and placed both palms against its trunk. The tree lit up with silver light. Names, thousands of them, rose into the sky like fireflies. Ash cried, "What are you doing?" She whispered, "I remember who I am." The forest pulsed. The trees awakened. Vines wrapped around the soldiers. Roots pulled them into the ground. But the fire was too strong. Kyra turned to Ash, tears in her eyes. "Take my name," she said. "Remember it." The last memory. The next morning, only Ash remained. The forest was gone. But Ash emerged from the ruins, holding one thing. A single leaf from the whispering birch, glowing softly. He walked for years, across cities and kingdoms. He spoke her name wherever he went, Kyra. And those who had forgotten, the lost, the erased, the silent, began to awaken. The world remembered, because she had remembered first. The forest of names may be gone, but every time a forgotten child is found, or a lost memory is returned, a new leaf grows somewhere in the world. And if you listen closely in the hush between dreams and dawn, you might still hear Kyra's whisper in the wind, "Sleep now. Let the forest hold your name too." The Song of Hollow Waters. They said the lake sang to those who listened closely enough. But only if you had nothing left to lose. Elle and I had grown up beside the hollow waters, a lake suspended in time. No one could say how deep it went. Its surface never rippled, not even when the cold wind of winter screamed across the valley. Fog hovered like breath over a forgotten grave, always shifting but never lifting. The village, small and soft-edged, floated gently on the lake's edge, built on stilts, tethered to silence. The people here didn't speak much, not because they had nothing to say, but because the lake demanded stillness. Every word uttered carried across the water like a warning. Eleni was different. She had been born with a voice that echoed. Her cries as a baby had startled the gulls from their nests and drawn mist things up from the reeds. Her mother whispered of an old curse, or a gift, depending on how one saw it. By the time Eleni was 16, she had taken up her mother's mantle as keeper of echoes, the one who tended the ruins beneath the lake, who spoke to the water when others dared not. Her task was to guard the silence, to honor the songs trapped beneath the waves. The villagers believed that long ago, before the fog swallowed the stars, a city had drowned under these waters. A city that had once been vibrant, humming with the voices of dream weavers and story carvers. But they grew greedy, it was said. They tried to bottle the lake's song, to bind it into spells. And so the hollow waters took them, drowned their buildings, their magic, their laughter. All but their echoes. Elenai had never seen the city. Only in dreams did she hear its bells. On quiet nights, she walked the narrow bridges and floating paths alone, humming old tunes her mother used to sing, lullabies from a world that no longer existed. But everything changed the day she heard a new voice that it came from the water. Not from below, but above, a stranger, rowing a boat with no oars. A figure cloaked in dark blue, face obscured by mist. His eyes found hers as if he'd known exactly where to look. "Are you the keeper?" he asked, voice barely louder than the hush of waves. Elenai nodded. "I'm here to listen," he said. No one ever said that. They came to forget, to mourn, to disappear. No one ever came to listen. She studied him. He bore no mark of the village, no threads of silence woven into his cuffs, no salt twine tied to his belt. He was not one of them. "What do you seek?" she asked softly. He looked past her, to the far shore that could never be reached. "My sister," he whispered. "She vanished into the lake 10 years ago. They say the hollow took her. But I hear her voice in the river when I sleep. I need to know if she sings still." Elenai's heart tightened. People did not ask such things. "Sometimes the lake mimics those we've lost," she warned. "It sings to our grief. But what you hear may not be her." "I know," he said. "But if there's even an echo of her left, I must find it." Against the rules of her order, she allowed him to stay. They walked the paths at dusk, where the fog bled gold from the setting sun. He spoke little, but when he did, it was with purpose. Stories of his sister, her stubborn smile, her fascination with deep water. He called her Iri, short for Iravella. Each night, Elenai brought him closer to the drowned ruins, even though no one was permitted near. The lake was treacherous near the center. There were songs that lured souls away, down into sleep from which they never woke. But he wasn't afraid. One night, as frost clung to the rails and moonlight scattered across the lake like pearls, they reached the edge of the old bell tower, a jagged spire half submerged in memory. Here, the lake whispered louder. A chorus of forgotten dreams. Elenai touched the stone. It thrummed like a heartbeat. "She came here," the stranger said. "She dreamed of rebuilding this place, of lifting it from the depths." Elenai stared at him. "How do you know that?" He looked at her, truly looked. "Because I've been here before. I was just a child. She brought me in the boat one night, when the mist parted. We sang to the ruins. And I remember, they answered." The song of the lake shifted. A high note pierced the fog, soft but sharp, like a name being called. "Iara." Elenai's breath caught. She felt something rise in her, an ancient awareness that pulsed through the bones of the lake and into her skin. The hollow waters were listening, and they remembered. She turned to him. "We can go deeper." He hesitated, but then nodded. They took a skiff, narrow and carved from driftwood bound in silver moss. Elenai sang to it, and it stirred from sleep, gliding into the mist like a ghost. They sailed for hours. The world around them disappeared. Only water, fog, and memory remained at last. The mist broke like breath from parted lips. And there it was, the city beneath the water, whole. The spires shimmered beneath the surface, upside down. Towers of glass, bridges of moon thread, domes that pulsed with the light of sleeping stars. It was not ruins. It was dreaming. Elenai's hands trembled. "This is the Echo City," she whispered. "Still alive." He leaned over the edge, eyes wide. "Iri," he breathed out. A shape moved in the water, slender, graceful. Hair like kelp, eyes like sorrow. She reached toward the surface, fingertips brushing the air. The skiff stopped. Elenai looked into the eyes of the girl beneath. It was Iri, but she had changed. She wore the lake now, its silence, its weight. She was bound to the city, a guardian, a soul traded for song. Iri's gaze locked onto her brother's, and she smiled. The song that rose from the lake then was unlike anything Elenai had ever heard. It was mourning and hope and the unbearable ache of memory. It was a lullaby from a world that refused to die. Iri placed a hand over her heart. The stranger whispered her name. Elenai felt it then. The lake choosing that it would allow them one final moment. Time stilled. Fog held its breath, and brother and sister spoke not with words, but with the aching language of lost time. When the skiff drifted back, Elenai was alone. The stranger had stayed. The hollow had taken him. not as punishment, but as reunion. She returned to the village changed. Each night now, she stands at the edge of the lake, singing. And if you listen closely enough, when the mist is thin and the stars are bright, you will hear a harmony rising from the deep, a brother and sister singing the city awake. The hollow waters no longer grieve. They remember, they sing, and Elenai, keeper of echoes, sings with them, the last witness to a love that even the deepest waters could not drown.